All right, so let's bring him on. Justin Reed, the spokesman. How you doing tonight, Justin?
Good, not too bad. Thanks for having me. It's should be a fun one.
Absolutely. Well, last night, obviously, Gonzaga gets the win in Provo. They avenge that loss that they had last year, their only WCC loss, falling. They fell last year, so this year go down to Provo and barely cover the spread that was 10.5. They win 82 to
Yep.
71. What were some of your takeaways from that game watching Gonzaga?
BYU's a tough team. They always are. I know they had no fans down there, but going down to the Marriott Center is always just a tough ask. BYU does a great job at home. They feed off of just natural energy, I think, because they definitely, no matter, GU was able to keep them at arm's length most of the game, but never could quite get that knockout blow. BYU is a good little team. I mean, they're moving up in the efficiency ratings right now. And Ken Palm looks like they're 33 right now, so they're just outside of that top 25. I think Lenardi had them as a 9 seed in the NCAA tournament. So, I mean, again, this like you mentioned, spread was 10.5. GU just covered that. 11-point win on the road against a almost top 25 team. There's not much more you can really ask from them, and nobody really played particularly poorly. Suggs had a really good game, his first good game probably in a couple of weeks, where he just did most things well. Even though he started off with 2,000 the first 10 minutes, 11 minutes. But he ended up, being able to stay clean, only picked up one more personal foul. It looks like the last 15 or so minutes of game time for him. So, yeah, it was nice to see. Yeah, you got to be happy with a win. Obviously happy with a road win against a decent BYU team.
And then I noticed so what BYU seemed to do was a similar strategy to what I saw West Virginia do a little bit, where they said, okay, we're not going to let Kispert beat us. But then so they just pressured him on the 3-point line. He hits that first three, and then he only hits one more, I think, for the rest of the game.
Yep.
But then that leaves Suggs to go one-on-one. So it's kind of pick your poison.
Right.
So, do you think is that the best way, I guess, to beat Gonzaga, is to take your chance with Suggs? Or what do you think
tough.
about that?
And, I've talked a few times to a couple different people about this. And the problem with GU for a lot of people this year is you lock down on one aspect of their offense, and they're going to beat you another way. You've seen people try and load down low against them. You've seen West Virginia and BYU try and take away the perimeter game. But they have guys who can do so many things, and they don't have an it guy, a guy who just takes over the game. And, some people might argue that that's a bad thing. But to me, if you have a bunch of A players rather than A+ players, they all have the ceiling to be A+ players. And you saw a little bit of that from Suggs last night. But, you look at 4 guys that were in double figures. Yai only had 4 points. He only missed 1 minute of game time. He was out there the entire time. And, you would never think that, because he's always active with 7 rebounds, which, again, he just kind of solidifies himself as probably the best rebounding guard in the country. But, yeah, I like what I see as far as the flexibility of what GU can do. I think we've seen that a couple different times over the last couple of weeks. Some of these WCC teams kind of throwing a wrench in what GU wants to do. But what makes them so good is that those adjustments are a lot easier when you have 10 different adjustments you can make, rather than Kispert can't shoot, let's give the ball to Suggs. Also Timmy finished with 20 points, 13 boards, and then the Zags as a team finished with 14 assists, and they were really able to spread the ball around.
Yeah, right. And that's such a good point, because they do have this year so many guys who can get you in so many different ways, and they just play so efficiently. And that kind of brings me into my question, which is, since you've been covering the team, how does this team compare to the last previous teams, like the national championship team, the team with Brandon Clark and Rui Hachimura? How is the team like this team compared to some of those other teams?
That's a great question. I think, you look at teams of GU's past as far as how their rosters have been situated. 2017 is the closest thing you could compare it to as far as bench depth, as far as versatility and athleticism. But I mean, you even go back to 2013 with Wilshire and Olenek there. That team had small guards. They had a lot of, and athletically gifted, but not to the point where they're competing with the big guards of Duke and North Carolina. And we saw that over and over and over again, where they would get manhandled. And this team has Jalen Suggs, who stands 6'4", 6'5", who doesn't really feel that pressure of having to deal with some of those bigger guards. Ayayi's also up in that range. Kispert at 6'6", 6'7", depending on which media guide you're looking at. Nembhard at 6'4", also very athletic. So the big thing between the two teams, because even if you go back to that 2017 team, their athletic guy was Silas Nelson. Norvell wasn't playing yet; he was just redshirting. Josh Perkins was still 6'3", but he wasn't super athletic as far as he didn't have the next level quickness or next level vertical ability. And then obviously with Nigel Williams-Goss, same kind of thing. Didn't really have next level quickness. A competitor. I mean, all those guys are super good competitors, but Jalen Suggs, Joel Ayayi, and Corey Kispert are different on an athletic level than any of those guys were. Now, if we look down low, then I'd argue that that team was way more athletic down low with, like you mentioned, Clark and Tilly. As well as, Karnowski wasn't athletic, but he filled a role on that team very well. And then you obviously had Zach Collins coming off the bench as well. That was just an absolute monster. So down low, the athleticism might not be there, but the fundamental aspect of Gonzaga basketball still really rings true. I just think this team is more adept at being able to handle multiple things, because the problem with that team was their ability just to score in multiple different ways. They had a three-point shooter in Jordan Matthews, and they had Jonathan Williams and Karnowski that had back to the basket moves. But if one of those aspects wasn't working well, the other one kind of faltered, and we saw that a little bit in the national championship game with Karnowski really struggling and causing the perimeter game to have to take more of the load. And for instance, Josh Perkins in that national championship game had a really rough second half. And so that's where this team is a little more well suited, just because they can do it all and they have the flexibility to do it all.
Right. And it's kind of funny that you say that, because when I look at the past teams, that's kind of what I've thought too, is they just haven't had a guard with that elite level athleticism to get them over the top. So Jalen Suggs is the type of guy, when I saw that we're going to get him this year, I thought, man, this could be the guy that could put them potentially over the top. And so far it's turned out.
Yeah, it's what no Zag fan has ever seen before. And so when you saw those games early on against Kansas, for instance, everybody was just shocked. And even national pundits are still shocked about Jalen Suggs being on the Zags, because they have never had an athlete do what he can do. And that is what makes him special, and what's going to allow him to, if he continues to progress, to be something special.
Right.
Yeah, I completely agree. Like, with the point you made, and I don't think I even realized like how much, but like really up until I would say up until the year Brandon Clark and Rory Hachimura were there, it really felt like Gonzaga was a really good mid-major, not a blue blood. And that really does feel like the turning point of like, okay, we are getting those dudes now. We're getting the Rorys, like the big athletic NBA type, like physical body type dudes.
Which it's crazy how that happened, because you're right.
Yeah.
It just, you never really felt like they got the top guy. Before this, Zach Collins was their highest ranked prospect.
Yeah.
And even he was still in the 20s. And so, what this team's been able to do on the recruiting front, and like you said, since 2016, 2017, has really been impressive.
Yeah. Is there anyone on this year's team? I know you talked about like the depth that they have. Is there anyone that's surprised you, like good or bad, that you really just didn't see like coming, I guess?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm a little surprised that some of the other freshmen aren't getting a little bit more playing time, specifically Strother and Harris. I think probably my biggest surprise factor, if I had to just pick anybody, would be, and I know he's really raw, and I know he's from a different country, and I've talked with him, and I can tell his English isn't very good. But Omar Ballo, just still not quite knowing how to use his body yet. And I tweeted about this yesterday during the game, actually, and there was a time where he got the ball and he was like 3 feet from the basket, and he went straight up rather than attacking the basket, and he kind of settled for that 3-foot range shot when he could have finished at the rim. I mean, he's 7 foot 260. I mean, he can get to the rim if he wants to get to the rim in that situation. So for me, it's probably him. And again, like I said, he's young still. I mean, heck, I think he's still only 19. If he's not 19, he just turned 20. And so you got to give him a little bit of space there. But I think just as far as what I was expecting after 1 year of seasoning as a redshirt, I was just expecting a little bit more at this point.
Are there any guys? So it seems like, I mean, Cook and Ballo have had injuries, so that kind of threw off the didn't throw off the rotation, but it changed it a little bit. It seems consistently what the bench unit, depending on whether Nembhard or Watson starts. In this instance, let's say Nembhard's coming off the bench. It's consistently Cook, Nembhard, Ballo when he's healthy, and then a little bit of Julian Strother mixed in. Mm-hmm. Do you think that rotation's kind of set with what Mark Few wants to do going into the tournament? Do you think we'll see more Strother, more Harris? How do you see that going?
Yeah, that's a good question. Because last night, for instance, Harris didn't even get in. Strother had 7 minutes. Cook had 8. Watson only had 15. And then the other 5 guys, all Suggs actually played the least of the other 6. Excuse me. Other 5 had only 27 minutes. So I think. Real quick, I think I can put Watson in that same boat too, as far as the kind of underwhelmer to go along with Ballo. I think his issue was just getting some of that confidence back from last season. He dealt with so many injuries too, and that shoulder that bugged him for a couple of weeks before they finally shut him down. And I think it's just him trying to get his confidence back. He had not on Monday, but not yesterday, but whatever the last game was. He had a really nice dunk and down the baseline that I even tweeted about and said, that's pretty nice to see, a little bit of confidence for him to attack the rim like that. But I think for what Few looking forward, if I look kind of at the splits, I think he would like more from Watson. Watson's is more athletic than Timmy. Watson's they're probably the most athletic guy over 6'7", 6'8". So I think you'd like to see more out of him. I think Cook will get a few more minutes moving forward. He had a couple good games there the last couple weeks since he's been back. I think Strother and Harris will be guys who probably won't see too much of the court come tournament time. If we look at how deep they are, that would be 5. They're 7 deep without Strother, Ballo, or Harris. I mean, 7 is what they dealt with all of last season. And so if they can get 5 to 8 minutes from a Ballo, from a Strother, from a Harris, I think Mark Few would be thrilled with that, just to give some of these guys a little bit more rest, because playing 30, 35 minutes for most of these guys isn't a problem. I know people always talk about them getting tired come tournament time, but I've never had a guy come up to me or get asked or answer a question about being tired and them saying, yeah, it's been kind of a rough season. So most of these guys are at the leading up to their primes as far as their athletic ability. So I don't think any sort of stamina issues come into play, at least for this team.
Kind of shifting gears a little bit. So far, the narrative, and I think that's been correct, at least in my opinion, is that Gonzaga and Baylor are the 2 teams that are far ahead of everyone else. And I mean, you could put Villanova maybe up there. Texas has played well too. But what type of team in the tournament could give Gonzaga problems? And if there's a weak kind of link in Gonzaga's team, where would a team exploit that?
Yeah, the one thing, and I kind of alluded to this earlier as far as the 2017 team, big depth really is their issue. Timmy is a star. Watson has the potential to be a very strong college basketball player. But going up against another Texas Tech of 2-3 years ago that dominated them in that Sweet 16 game, who is going to be someone who's going to be problematic again. This team though is better suited for that. They can deal with those issues down low because their perimeter game and their speed and their offense can kind of overshadow that. But for me, the biggest problem is going to be a team that can really beat them up down low. One thing that always worries me, you haven't really seen it too much because they dominated St. Mary's, they dominated Virginia. But I just continue to think about a team that really likes to slow down the tempo. The thing that's going to keep GU, I think, okay in that regard is their defense has been so much better this year than it has since that 17 team that it allows them to get those defensive rebounds and start that fast break, and doesn't allow a West Virginia or Virginia to get set up in their defensive set. So as long as their defense stays up to par, I don't think they'll have a problem with tempo. But if their defense falters at all, a slow team could cause them some issues. Or like I said, I think a really big physical athletic bigs would really be problematic for them too.
Right, which would be a team like Baylor, and then also Texas Tech and West Virginia, who they already played, seem to kind of fit that mold. So, how do you think?
Yeah, and Baylor, that's a good point. Yeah, Baylor does have some good bigs too.
Yep. How do you think that Jalen Suggs and Corey Kispert, and then also Jolie, how do you think that they've elevated their draft stock this year?
Kispert far and away has done the most for his draft stock. Last year, he was a second-round draft pick. A lot of people thought he would be a useful guy to an NBA roster. Anybody who can shoot the way he shoots is going to find a spot. That it was never a question. It was the big thing was saying how could his quickness, his athleticism really hold up against big-time players. And we've seen that happen a little bit this year. We'll really see a lot of that in the NCAA tournament, which is going to be the next best point for him to move that draft stock up. I don't see him going any higher than 10. I'm actually surprised he's at 10. I think he's a borderline lottery pick. And I know that's almost essentially borderline, but 15, I think, is probably closer where he should go. But I think he's done a great job at elevating his draft stock. And I talked about this on my show, but he's the oldest on ESPN's mock draft that they released about a week ago. He is the oldest player in the top 29. Davion Mitchell on Baylor is the next closest guy, or he's older than Kispert, but Kispert's older than everybody else. So
interesting.
That's always a surprise to see. I think Suggs was always going to find himself in the top 5. One kind of fun fact that I also talked about on my show is there's 3 Jalens in the top 6. So it's a good year to be named Jalen. So true. I think we might see some. If those guys are good in the NBA, you might see an uptick in Jalen's here moving forward. And then I think Ayayi has only up to go. He's a very useful, versatile guard who I think is very well suited for the next level because of his rebounding abilities. I think he has the potential to be a better shooter, better scorer if he needed to be. And we saw a little bit of that last year. I mean, there were a few games there where he scored 20, 25 points. So I wouldn't be surprised to see his name climb up those draft boards, because right now he's going in the second round to Boston at 53rd overall pick. And, it wouldn't surprise me to see him moving up into the 30s and, garnering a little bit more attention. He's almost 21. And so, that's keeping him lower, but I could see him going right around the turn of the, 39-40 area.
Do you have a draft comp for those two top guys, Suggs and Kispert? I know that Joe Harris gets thrown around with Kispert a lot, worked out together, similar games. You concur? And what about for Suggs?
That's a good question. I think for Suggs, he's kind of a unique player. He's a slasher, but he has the ability to also, as we saw yesterday, he can shoot the ball. It's just a matter of becoming more consistent on that end. Physical wise, I've seen a couple people talk about Drew Holiday as far as the size, which, wouldn't be a terrible person to end up being. Drew's had some issues, but he's played really well and has gotten better. That'd probably be a decent one. I think his quickness on the defensive end has really, kind of cemented him as a top pick, because he's going to score. He's going to get his assist. He has incredible court vision. I think the big thing was seeing how he could adjust to the quickness of the college game, as well as just seeing him just become a little more consistent on the shooting end. And then also the other thing that just I've seen recently, I think he presses a little too hard sometimes. He gets a little wild. He has been on the opposite end of some bad charging calls recently, but at the same time, he's got to be a little bit better with his body control.
Continuing to talk about like the NBA draft, We know that Suggs and Pittsburgh almost for sure. I mean, I would be very, very surprised if either of them didn't. I mean, believe Pittsburgh's junior, senior, and even though Suggs is a freshman, he will be a top 5 pick.
Right.
Do you think either of Ayayi or Timmy come out after this year? I know their stock is way more fluctuate on whether or not they would be drafted or where they would be. Do you think either one or anyone else comes out this year?
That's a good question. I think Ayayi does. I think he'll play himself higher up into the draft boards, and I think that'll get him to go. He was already kind of thinking about testing the NBA waters last year. Timmy's a really interesting one to me, and I've talked with a few people about this. Timmy's problem, he has the skill set and the ability to make the NBA, but the problem with Timmy is he's kind of old school. He doesn't really shoot it all that well. He doesn't have next level quickness. He doesn't really have impressive length, but he's a hard worker. He has a multitude of post moves that he can work with. He is a fearless competitor, a great teammate, and just a guy who's going to go get the job done. And it would not surprise me to see him come back unless he goes into the NBA Combine and gets some draft guys kind of telling him some good news. And that's a great possibility. He's done the thing with Timmy, though, too, is he's great at marketing himself. You know, he had the whole mustache thing earlier. He provides great interviews, and that will definitely help him. You know, NBA scouts and NBA teams would like to have a guy like him on their team, I think. He's just a little old school, and that can still fit in the NBA to some regard. You know, Sabonis, when I thought he came out.
I think you muted yourself.
All right, let's try. Let's keep that going.
You're good.
So yeah, I don't know what happened. It literally just came up. Zoom audio muted. So
Yeah.
I thought Sabonis was a little not ready for the NBA as far as his skill set, but he's turned into. All right, there we go. And so I think Timmy has a spot. I think Timmy has a spot as long as he continues his development. It's just a matter of seeing what he can continue to do on the offensive end and even the defensive end. You know, he's also slightly undersized, but I think he'll have a role in the NBA. Is it this year? I don't know, but I think he'll find himself at least testing the NBA waters.
What about?
Go for it.
Oh, sorry. I was just curious. What about Andrew Nembhard?
Nembhard's also an interesting case because of the fact he has a lot of talent. He has a lot of gameplay down in Florida. His problem is, again, just shooting. He's also slightly undersized. He's under 200 pounds for being 6'5". He could afford to put on another 10 pounds of muscle there. But he also has a chance to be a role player in the NBA, I think, because he has the quickness. He appears to have the athleticism. It looks like he has the length. I haven't looked up his wingspan, but it does seem like he kind of has some long arms there. The thing with Nembhard is just becoming a more consistent offensive threat. He appears to be a solid team leader. He can run GU's offense, which is not easy to do, especially for a guy who wasn't even going to be playing this season until like a week and a half before the season started. So if he was able to learn GU's system in a COVID year, a shortened COVID year, and he was able to slot right in and be, arguably the Zags' fourth most important player, I think that's pretty impressive. And I think a lot of NBA people will be looking at that. Again, his problem though is just being able to, he's getting older too, but then also his consistency on the offensive side.
We talked some about Jalen Suggs, and you were mentioning how Gonzaga's never had a player like him before, how national analysts are still shocked that he came to Gonzaga. Is he the most athletic player, though, that you've seen at Gonzaga? Because, man, Brandon Clark, that dude could fly, and I think that there's an argument there.
That's a great point. The other really good as far as athletic guards, for instance, Jeremy Pargo was an athletic freak. And he shocked the GU when he came here. He wasn't really highly touted, but man, he could jump out of the building. So that's another good option. As far as just pure speed, Or Earl Knight was also another one of those guys. Earl Knight, way back in the day, was a defensive madman. Didn't really have much on the offensive end to offer, but he was also an athletic freak. I think the thing with Suggs is we've never had a slasher type player like that. We've had some guys come in. Brian Alberts was thought to be kind of that way, and it never quite panned out. Ryan Woolridge last year, same kind of thing. Admon Gilder. There's been a couple of these guys who have been, thought to be that kind of player, but Suggs has been the one who really has just put the entire package together. He doesn't jump as high as Jeremy Pargo or probably Earl Knight, but he's explosive in his own ways, and he's faster, quicker, probably smarter as far as it comes on the basketball court. And so I think it's just what he looks like on the court is something that GU has never seen before. And he's fun to watch. He's a really fun player to watch. And it's unfortunate that we only get him for a year.
Yeah, definitely.
Kind of an interesting question. It's very different topic than what we've been doing. I know this has been a discussion, not as much recently, but definitely up until the past couple of years of Gonzaga looking to either leave the WCC to either sidestep or quote unquote upgrade to a tougher conference. Do you think there's any validity to that, to them leaving the WCC, or not really?
It's really unfortunate. I know GU would love to leave if they could. The problem is, if we look at the most obvious one would be the Pac-12. The issue is GU has no football team. And so it's kind of a non-starter for the Pac-12. And there's a lot of people around the country who don't even care and say, well, you should join anyway. And it's like, well, that's not quite how that works. And so I don't see them going to the Pac-12. The Mountain West has always been discussed because it's also in the same kind of area. But the Mountain West really hasn't been all that special as far as, looking at San Diego State and Nevada are kind of the big teams over there. And that would be fun. Problem with that, there's no football again, which really just is the biggest reason why GU can't move conferences. The WCC has no football outside of BYU, who runs as an independent anyway. And so, and then the other one that people talked about, or two other ones, there was a Jesuit league that they were talking about, getting the Georgetown, Villanova, some of those teams to be in a Jesuit league. Now we're looking at geographical problems. GU being tucked up here in the Pacific Northwest, where almost every single other Jesuit school in the United States resides, east of Ohio, causes a bit of a predicament as far as conference games go. So, and then the Big East has always been discussed too, where Villanova currently is. But again, same thing. Big East is a little bit further away from the West Coast than a lot of other conferences. So I don't see them going anywhere. I know when they pressured the WCC, I think it was 2 years ago, is to kind of deal with some of the money structures. I know over the years, Few has taken some shots at some of the other WCC schools, saying how they've put more money toward their swimming teams than basketball, and they wonder why they're not very good. So I know they're trying to get WCC better. I think WCC's floor is better than it has been ever. Moving forward, we don't have a St. Mary's who's a top 10 team, top 15 team like they were last year, but in the years prior. But I really do think the WCC will get better, and I think GU makes them better. And, if we look at the team rankings here, some efficiency rankings, the WCC is the fifth, and believe me, GU carries the conference a little bit as far as the efficiency, but still GU or the WCC is still fifth best on team rankings, and that's above the ACC, which is really weird, above the Pac-12, above the Mountain West, and above the Big East. I mean, they're only sitting behind the American Conference, SEC, Big Ten, and Big 12, which isn't really that surprising. So it kind of sucks, but GU I think does a really good job at scheduling tough non-conference things. One stat I saw a couple months ago is since Mark Few took over, GU has played more ranked non-conference games than anybody else in the country with 66. We're second most behind Kentucky. So I mean, they're trying to play people.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's a chance just with Larry Scott leaving the Pac-12, if there could maybe be a chance for negotiations there. I know you've said football's the non-starter, but maybe a chance
Larry
with a different
Scott sucks.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's bad.
Not wrong.
I mean, there wasn't much anything going on in the Pac-12 since he had been there. I mean, even like they released a sheet of everything he had done over his time there, and it's like there's 5 things on here.
I saw that.
Been here for
Yeah.
so long.
Yeah.
Like the big thing was starting the Pac-12 network, and that thing sucks. I mean, you can't even get it with DirecTV, and there's no streaming. I mean,
Dude, I haven't watched it at all.
It's just not
It
good. So
sucks.
that definitely helps. That'll definitely help at least the discussions. Whoever they do decide to pick, you'd think it would be someone better. But that will definitely at least help those conversations. Maybe it at least brings more Pac-12 meetings against Gonzaga. You know, the GU's had home and homes with Arizona. They used to have them with UW and WSU consistently. It's just a matter of maybe the right leadership in place will, make it not conference play, but just maybe more consistent non-conference opponents there in the Pac-12.
Yeah.
And I think you made a really excellent point talking about the WCC. Is the WCC is way better than it has been. I mean, you have teams like St. Mary and BYU that are consistently tournament teams year in and year out, which, I mean, until the past 5 years, we didn't see. We saw maybe one other team, if anything.
Yeah, you're seeing
definitely.
a lot of teams, the Pacifics, the Pepperdines, the San Franciscos, the Portland there for a couple of years. I know they're not good now, but Portland there for a couple of years was it was a while back. It was when Ryan Nicholas was there, the guy from Prep up here in Spokane. But yeah, I think it's just a matter of the WCC recognizing that basketball is the most profitable sport, and just GU pressuring them more. I think GU pressuring them more to spread the money out more equally to the teams that earn most of the money come tournament time is the only thing that's going to start making these other WCC teams pump money into their basketball teams.
Yeah,
definitely. Well, Justin, we'll let you go. Before you dip, though, how can listeners, Gonzaga fans, look you up? Twitter, social media, read your stuff?
Yeah. So I'm on Twitter at JustinReed99. That's where you'll find all my Spokesman stuff. My podcast that I do with my co-host Andrew Tenney through Spokane Talks is The Locker Room, which you can find on Facebook, but I link it there every week on my Twitter. And I think that's supposed to go out on Spotify. I think they're having issues with it, but mainly my Twitter. Everything I do will end up on my Twitter. This will end up on my Twitter when you guys get it edited and done. And so it's just a matter of following me there and just kind of, a lot of Zags, some Seahawks stuff. Mariners, more other Zags sports, Zags baseball. I just tweeted right before I came on. They had a couple all WCC preseason picks, but that's definitely the best place to kind of keep track of me.
Sounds good. Well, we appreciate the time.
Thanks for having me.
Let you bounce. Yep.
All right. Thanks.
Hey,
see you guys later.
Have a good evening. Thanks.